Hey guys, Synchro Fanatic here, and today I'm going to be giving you a Machina control deck profile. Apologies if the camera quality is a bit wonky. I am filming this on my iPhone with the new tripod I just bought, so it may be a bit wonky and not exactly professional standard, but hey ho, if you can tolerate it, I'd be ever so grateful. So let's get started. So we start off with 3 copies of Machina Gear Frame. Now Machina Gear Frame is effectively the Stratos of the deck, so on normal summon you search any Machina card and add it to your hand. Pretty simple stuff. Obviously, cards like that you always want to play as much as you can, unless there's a very good reason not to. You can also equip to unearth machine monster to protect it from card effects once, like he sacrificed himself. You know, that the sort of a deal that you're used to with protection by card effects. So usually, when what you search off Gear Frame is Machina Unclaspar. When Unclaspar is added to the hand via a card effect, he special summons himself, and then on summon, you're allowed to send 1 Machina card from your deck to the graveyard. So usually you send some of your higher level monsters as we get into. I also play 1 copy of Machina Possessed Rage. Possessed Rage is one of these tech choices I've made, which sounds weird in a Machina deck. Why would you play a Machina card and call it a tech? Because most people are playing the Lord of the Heavenly Prison build, which protects your back row. I actually can't afford those right now because this is a locals based deck. Like, you know, it's the deck I just take to locals and have a laugh with because it's fun. So I'm not really willing to put in the investment that much for it. But Possessed Rage is pretty good because on summon he can actually resurrect a level 4 machine monster from the graveyard, which allows you to go into some Xyz plays. So he's good for the grind game, and I think he's definitely worth the inclusion. He can also bounce a spell and trap card by bouncing one of your machine monsters as well. I think it's bouncing. Is it bouncing or is it popping? Yes, return to the hand. So sometimes that can come in useful, but we're mainly here just for the resurrection. I also play 2 copies of Machina Metal Cruncher. Metal Cruncher's a weird one, as you can see by the level, he's level 9. But if you have no face-up cards in your control, you can normal summon him, reveal 3 Earth Machines from your deck, and your opponent picks one of them, and you add that card to your hand. So he's effectively like your backup searcher. He's not as good as Gear Frame, because Gear Frames gets you into a longer line of plays with Xyz summoning, but Metal Cruncher is a decent monster to search, because you can say, reveal Fortress, Citadel, add one of them to your hand and you can get some additional pluses that way. So he's a pretty good card still, but definitely don't need him at more than I'd say 2 copies of. 1 copy of Machina Air Raider. Air Raider pops another Machina card and then special summons another Machina from the deck with a level lower. It's a good target to summon off the trap card Machina have, and it's not a bad card to discard for Fortress either. So you don't need more than 1 copy. I was playing with 2 for a time, but it's a bit bricky and on its own it doesn't really do enough. The reason it pops a monster is good, the way it pops a monster is good though, because that does trigger some of your other Machina cards. Next we have one of the OG Machina boss monsters from the structure deck from the 5Ds era, Machina Fortress. And this card's kind of weird because you can discard machine monsters whose levels equal 8 or more to special summon in from their hand or graveyard. Now, a bit of a weird ruling thing I've found about this card on Master Duel is that you can discard himself and another machine monster both from the hand and still special summon him from the graveyard, even though you've discarded him. It's a bit of a weird one. I don't know if it applies to the TCG, but it applies on Master Duel, so I assume it works here. But Machina Fortress is really good because if he's targeted by a monster effect, your opponent has to discard 1 card to actually finish activating the effect, which is pretty funky. You know, it's like a bit of an extra cost for targeting him. And if he's destroyed by battle or a card effect, you can destroy 1 card your opponent controls, which is really good under things like Skill Drain, because Skill Drain obviously negates all monster effects. That doesn't work on Fortress, so you can help pop some other annoying cards in the process. While also triggering the new version of Fortress, the newest boss monster, Machina Citadel. This card's actually kind of mental because it only needs to be summoned by a card effect for his summoning requirement. He's a Regeki, but it's based on attack position, so you target an Earth Machine monster you control, destroy it, and all monsters your opponent controls will attack less than that monster's. So usually you target himself because he comes back so easy, but you can target something else if it's a lower level, be able to pop it by a card effect, and just nuke the board. Really powerful Machina monster, really awesome card to play, and is just a very, very annoying threat for your opponent to deal with. And you only really need 1 because you can recycle it easily enough. And then we get to the newest boss monster from the actual Burst of Destiny set, which came out a few months back, Machina Ruin Force. So I know there was an FTK going around with this card, but for Machina specifically, he has a bit of a Fortress-like condition where he's in the graveyard. You banish Machina monsters up to level 12 or more, special summons himself. When he's in the battle phase, if your opponent activates any card effects, You pay half your life points more than once per turn. You can pay half your life points, negate that activation of the card, and then half your opponent's life points. So once he gets to the battle phase, they're not activating cards, and he's 4/6. So he's going to beat most monsters in battle. Even a Blue Eyes Ultimate is weaker than him, which is kind of crazy to think about. But if he is destroyed by card effect, you can special summon machine monsters from your banished pile equal to the number, equal to the level of 12. So let's say you have a Citadel you banish for the cost of Reinforce, you can re-summon the Citadel from your banished pile. So it's just a big like last resort sort of thing where you can just come in, drop this dude, they have to answer it, and then you just get a Citadel back. So he has a lot of utility, and I think he's a really good backup plan for Citadel. And 4/6 attack is honestly kind of crazy. Not like the game's dictated by attack, but sometimes in a simplified game state, which this deck is designed to grind it down to, it's important. I also play 2 copies of Scrap Recycler. Scrap Recycler you know from Walker's format if you've been playing then. Just dumps a machine from deck to graveyard, but you can actually activate his Recycle effect, which recycles Earth machines from the graveyard to the deck and lets you draw a card. Doesn't come up very often, but there is a particular reason why we play Scrap Recycler, besides just sending Citadel or Fortress, depending on what we have in our hand. But I'll get into that later. And that's it for the monster lineup. I play no hand traps, so that's just going to be something where you're like, oh, where's the hand traps? I don't play any in the main deck. So let's go on to the spells. We play 3 copies of Machina Redeployment. So this card is a discard to search 2 cards, which means it's very, very good Ash bait. No, I'm joking. It's not the most favourite card in the Machina lineup for me. It's if you discard a Machina card, you get to search any 2 Machina cards from your deck to your hand. But like I said, as good as this card is by adding cards, you still have to discard. It means it's very weak to an Ash. And I'm not playing Call by the Grave in this list because it's obviously not that big a deal if they do Ash it half the time because you've got the traps to keep you going. But this is still a worthwhile card to play. I have thought about dropping it to maybe like 2 or 1 copies because I have enough searches in the deck already on my normal summons. But I thought it's still good to get to those pieces anyway. So for now, it's at 3. It's still a good card. It's just a bit of a risky play. Like when you play trade in like a Blue Eyes deck, you know, you discard your Blue Eyes, they Ash and you're like, oh no. Next, time for a bit of a expensive card here. I apologise if you're a budget player, please look away. 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. This card is just really good for any rogue strategy, in my opinion. It's so useful if you can get your hands on this card. Banish 3, 6 monsters in the extra deck, sculpt your deck for the top 6, add the card you need, put the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. Fantastic card, like, it's so good. And considering Konami seem to dislike pot cards, if looking at Desires being limited to 1, rip in peace. Rip in peace. So you come out with some daft stuff. Rest in peace, Desires. But again, for a deck like this, Prosperity is really good. It does flip and flop with Extravagance as well, but I think Prosperity I prefer more to Extravagance because I'd rather have the ability to add an individual card, even though my opponent knows what it is, and being able to like get rid of specific cards in the extra deck. I like that feeling of control, but Extravagance is also really good, and you can play both if you're a madman. But for this deck, I decided just to play Prosperity for now, but I may change my list later on. And then for the final spell, a bit of a weird one, Urgent Schedule at 3 copies. So a going first deck playing a going second card. Well, because this is a very grindy deck, it's still going to be useful to play this card in multiples, especially if you lose the die roll and are forced to go second. Urgent Schedule is really good because it allows you to special summon a Scrap Recycler and a Machina card from your deck for free, basically, and that gives you more pluses. Like Scrap Recycler gets his ability to send from the deck to the graveyard, and there's a specific combo later on with Urgent Schedule using Scrap Recycler and one of the Machina monsters. And you probably guess what it is, but I'll go into a little bit later when we get to the extra deck. But Urgent Schedule is a fine card. And onto the traps, I play 3 copies of Machina Overdrive. This is also from the structure deck. Machina Overdrive is a card that pops your own Earth Machine monster and special summons another one from the deck. The reason this is good is because it allows you to pop your Earth Machine monster, get a better Earth Machine monster from your deck, so you can pop a little dude to get a big dude. And that also triggers stuff like Citadel, who says, okay, you destroyed, an Earth Machine was destroyed, I'm coming out to clap. You know, it's just a good trap card. It also has a recycle effect. You can banish it from the graveyard, take Machina monsters from your graveyard. Is it Machina monsters? I think it might be Machine monsters, actually. Machine monsters, and recycle them back into deck and draw one. So like a mini Daigusto Emerald. It's pretty good, but it also can target banished cards as well, which is an interesting little caveat that I quite like about that card. 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. I don't really think I need to talk too much about this one. It's a big board wipe. My cards like, being destroyed by card effects, so why not just have it, take it to my advantage, just get like a Citadel in trap form. And then the Deepest Lore, Ice Dragon's Prison. This is one of my favourite trap cards ever printed, because mainly for the lore, to be honest, I'll be level with you. But it's a very powerful trap card as well, being able to resurrect a monster, bare minimum, but also being able to resurrect a monster and potentially banish one of your opponents that's giving you problems is very good. Like, especially against decks like Eldritch, where you can take one of their Golden Lords and banish both of their Golden Lords, is a very crippling card. But I also think it's good against generic rogue decks at locals, which is why I main this at 3. Depending on your meta, your mileage may vary with this card, but for my locals, I think it's a pretty good shape. So I definitely run it in 3 copies. And that artwork is just, I mean, it's utter chaos. I love it. Next, we play some spicy Solemn Strike. So I say spicy, but we all know what Solemn Strike does. It's a very, very powerful counter trap. 1500, negate a summon or a monster effect. Does the job. Excellent card, excellent card. One of my favorite counter traps ever printed. Probably, in my opinion, the best counter trap ever printed. I think it's probably better than Judgment in some ways, because just that 1500 life points is almost negligible half the time. 2 compulsory evacuation device. If you heard of a card called Dragonmaid Tidying, you know how good bouncing cards is. Well, while this card isn't quite as good as Tidying, it's still kind of an annoying card for your opponent to deal with and can really cripple some decks. So I think it's a nice trap card just to play in here. And sometimes cards can't be destroyed by card effects, but they can be bounced, which is enough. And with so many normal trap cards, I do play 2 copies of Trap Check in case I need a specific trap card like Machina Overdrive or Torrential Tribute. You get the Jill's Trap Check is good for them because banish one, get another copy of it, set it. And then for a little bit of degeneracy and I guess pure pendulum hatred, I do play 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance. Because we play very few spells, this is just a nice card to slow other decks down that rely on spell cards. And this deck does thrive off, using floodgates. You can play like Skill Drain, Rivalry of Warlords, stuff like that if you want to. I picked Anti-Spell because I think it's one of those floodgates that people don't expect to see all the time, so it's a bit more tricky for them to play around in there, and they don't really plan around playing against Anti-Spell. They plan around stuff like there can be only one NX and stuff like that. And I don't think Rivalry is as good in the format as it is right now, even at locals. So, but that's it for the main deck. Now to the extra deck. I'm going to start with the Xyz monsters. So I play 3 copies of Gear Gigan X. This is the Xyz monsters for a Gear, which is an older machine deck. Detach 1, add a level 4 lower machine from your deck to your hand. Solid card. Like, I love this Xyz monster. Right? Just a nice, solid consistency boost. Something to go into with your gear frame. Get a search, smack into something, overlay it into the Xyz who must not be named. So really cool Xyz monster, and you can easily spare a couple of copies and just send it for prosperity. So just a nice card, and I think playing it 3 of it. I could probably put it down to 2, but I like just playing 3 for the sake of it. The next Xyz monster, I play a Evil Swarm. Evil Swarm Exton Knight. Don't need to talk about this card much. He is a big board go boom card for 2 level 4s. Pretty solid monster. I don't really think I need to talk about him too much. 1 Heavy Armor Train Iron Wolf. This is a bit of a cheeky card because you can target machine monster you control and it can attack directly. So it's good for time, which I hate the fact that that's a potential win condition, but it is what it is. We have to take what we can get. So pretty good just to steal some games as well. If your opponent's in the grind game and they're low on life, you can just go around their monsters and just take the win. And then I also play a Baguska. Baguska is an awesome rank 4, being able to slow a lot of decks down early on if you can set him up. And if you think it's going to be something like Salamangreat that do I think they sort of struggle with Baguska. I'm not entirely sure if they do anymore. I know what they did when they first started, but now they might have ways to play around it. But against some rogue decks, a Baguska can be crippling. So just a great time waster and also just a solid rank 4 to throw into your arsenal. And then for the last rank 4, I play number 27, Dreadnoid. This is a bit of a tech at the minute. I'm not sure how I feel about this card. I do think I quite like the potential with him because you can effectively make him into a higher rank monster like a Gustav or a Lieb. So you can make him into a Gustav Max or like a Great Magus Summit, and it does get you another material onto Zeus. It does make your Zeus a bit fatter, but I'm just trying this out. I'm not sure how good it is. There might be some occasions where it's really good and can clinch the game, but I think it's more of a meme card in some ways as well, but I do think it has some merit. So I'm testing it out to see if it works, but we'll see. For the rank 5, I play Drill Driver Vespinato. Just a solid Xyz monster. Gets a monster back from the graveyard when it is destroyed. Has piercing, which comes up occasionally. It's a pretty good monster. And for the big ranks, I play Super Rail Cannon Gustav Max. You know what Gustav Max does, he just big burn. Lieb to overlay in from Gustav Max just to get multiple hits. Pretty good card. Trains getting reprints was very big because Lieb was getting quite expensive after a while, but thankfully the gold reprints have really helped. And then to finish off the Xyz pool, of course, got to talk about one of the craziest Xyz monsters ever printed, Divine Arsenal Zeus. Zeus is crazy. Who'd have thought that making a Judgment Dragon effect as a quick effect would be a smart idea? Well, Konami did, and here we are. Being able to be summoned when any Xyz monster's battled, you can just overlay it onto any Xyz monster. You know what this card does if you've been following competitive play, and even if you haven't, you probably know what this card is. It's crazy good. I can't put it into words. It's just, immediately when it hits the board, it's a threat. It can be summoned, sweep the board there and then, or just sit there menacingly on the board waiting for your opponent's like, well, I've got to play around with Zeus. And yeah, it does hurt your stuff as well, especially in this deck where they want to destroy stuff instead of sending stuff, but it's so powerful and so threatening against a lot of decks that it's just an auto-include, and it just looks awesome to boot. And then for the non-Xyz monsters, the Link monsters, double-headed Anger Knuckle. Double-headed Anger Knuckle is pretty decent because it allows you to bring back a monster, like say Fortress, by sending himself. Fortress then get popped, bring back Citadel, and also get a pop at the same time. Just a pretty solid card and a nice link to boot. I play a copy of Scrap Riven. This is to do with the Urgent Schedule combo, so when you summon Scrap Cycler and a Machine Monster, you can link to these two and do the full combo where you can get a pop-off Scrap Recycler while also triggering Citadel. It's pretty good. I think it's very worthwhile to include in this deck, and it's a nice simple combo to get. Definitely underrated, and a lot of control decks I think should play because it's just a nice power play. And then to finish off the extra deck, one copy of Blacklisted Soldier, the Soldier of Chaos. Because you play a lot of high-level monsters, this is just in a really good unaffected boss monster that can just sit there and be a massive nuisance for some decks that can't get around it. And yeah, it's just an easy pop target as well. You don't necessarily need it, but if you think there's going to be a deck you're playing against that can't get around it as easily, it's pretty good. Anyway, that is the end. I do have a side deck, but I am going to keep it on the side here because side deck on the side because I don't really think that it's interesting to showcase a side deck, and it's going to be changing all the time, so it's not really that interesting. It's just like, okay, I just throw in Nibiru's or Gamma Seals or whatever. No one, I don't think anyone really wants to see the side deck in a deck profile unless it's like a competitive thing, which I'll be level willing with you. This isn't like super competitive, it's just trying to get this deck to work as best as possible. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. See ya!